In a bustling greenhouse on a warm afternoon, a young woman named Sarah was working diligently. She carefully planted tomato seedlings, loosening the soil and watering each bush with precision. Her clothes stuck to her in the heat, and sweat dotted her forehead as her hair escaped from beneath a colorful scarf. The older women around her praised her efforts, saying, "Sarah, you're such a hard worker. You'll make a wonderful wife someday. It's time to think about marriage. Have you noticed how David keeps looking at you?" Sarah straightened her back, stretched her aching muscles, and laughed. "Why would I need David? He's always following me, but he's so rude. I don't like him at all. Besides, I love someone else, though it's a secret." Martha, one of the older women, silently mused, "Everyone knows the landowner's son is courting you when his parents aren't around." After her work was done, Sarah changed clothes, freshened up, and took her bike to her grandmother's house. She opted for the route through the fields, enjoying the freedom of the open air. As she pedaled, a breeze lifted her spirits. She soon spotted a familiar jeep heading toward her. It was the landowner's son, Ethan. The jeep stopped, and Ethan, tall and strong, got out. She parked her bike by the roadside and embraced him tightly. Ethan kissed her and said with a smile, "My love, finally we're together. Admit it, you miss me." Blushing, Sarah responded softly, "Yes, I miss you so much. But Ethan, when will we stop hiding our relationship? I feel like you're ashamed of me." Ethan avoided the question, kissing her neck and replying, "Why would you think that? Don't you feel how much I love you? We're happy, and that's all that matters. Look, I brought you something from the city." He handed her a bag, and inside was a delicate white lace blouse. Sarah's eyes lit up. "It's beautiful, Ethan." "Thank you." She put it on and twirled around playfully. "Does it suit me? I'll wear it to the party this Saturday." Ethan's smile faltered. "I can't go to the party this Saturday. I promised my father I'd attend a meeting. But you should go and enjoy yourself, just don't stay too long, or I'll get jealous." Sarah sighed but didn't argue. She loved Ethan deeply and feared losing him. They embraced once more, and in that moment, Sarah was truly happy. The worries of her world melted away in his arms. When she arrived home, her grandmother, Mary, immediately noticed her joyful demeanor. With concern, she scolded her. "Sarah, you've been with Ethan again, haven't you? You should be more cautious. He hasn't proposed, nor has he introduced you to his family. What will you do when he leaves you for another?" "Grandma, don't say that. Ethan loves me. Look at this beautiful blouse he gave me. I'm sure he'll introduce me to his parents soon, and we'll get married," Sarah said with confidence, dismissing her grandmother's concerns. Mary, although worried, couldn't stay upset with Sarah for long. She hugged her granddaughter and gently patted her head, though deep down she feared that Ethan's wealthy family would never accept Sarah as one of their own. But Sarah, blinded by love, ignored the warnings, eagerly awaiting her next meeting with Ethan. Their relationship had begun when Sarah first came to work at the landowner's estate. Ethan, bringing supplies from the city, had noticed her right away. "Hey, beautiful, what's your name?" he'd teased. Sarah, flustered, had barely managed a reply before the landowner had scolded Ethan, warning him to stop fooling around. But Ethan had winked at her, and from that moment on, she'd been smitten. One rainy day, Ethan had offered her a ride home, and as they sat in the car, he had kissed her passionately, whispering, "You're mine. I won't let anyone else have you." From that day forward, they had met in secret. Ethan was confident, bold, and full of promises, and Sarah believed every word he said. He was her first love, and she dreamed of a future together. Not long after, Sarah found out she was pregnant. Fear gripped her. She wasn't sure how Ethan's parents would react. But when she told Ethan, he was calm and reassuring. "Don't worry. Tomorrow, we'll apply for a marriage license. My parents may be upset at first, but they'll come around." Relieved, Sarah hugged him tightly, feeling as though her worries had melted away. They quietly applied for the license the next day, but that night, a storm erupted at Ethan's house. His mother was furious. "How could you marry her? She's a poor girl, living with her grandmother. She's not fit for our family. We don't even know if that child is yours. You're making a terrible mistake." Ethan's mother spoke firmly. "There will be no wedding, and certainly no baby. We've said everything that needs to be said." Ethan stood his ground. "Mom, I've already promised Sarah. The wedding is next week, and I love her," he protested. "I'll take care of everything myself. You don't need to do anything." His father, Troy, interrupted with a cold tone. "There will be no wedding, and there will be no baby. That's final." Meanwhile, Sarah was blissfully unaware of the brewing conflict. She was elated, anticipating her upcoming wedding and the start of a family with Ethan. The next day, she arrived at work early, excited and hopeful. However, before she could even change into her work clothes, Troy appeared at the door with a stern expression. "Sarah, come to my office. We need to talk." Believing the conversation would be about the wedding, Sarah followed him, her heart full of hope. However, what awaited her was far from what she expected. Troy's voice was harsh as he spoke. "Ethan has told us everything, including your pregnancy. Don't think you can use this to force your way into our family. It's not going to happen. There will be no wedding, and we will never recognize that child. I'll give you money to have an abortion and leave town, preferably far away." Sarah was shocked, her heart sinking. "Ethan promised me we'd be together. We've already applied for a marriage license. I love him, and I'm carrying his child, your grandchild. I don't want your money, and I won't kill my baby." Troy slammed his fist on the desk, his face red with anger. "If you don't do as I say, I'll make sure everyone in this town knows you've been with other men and don't even know who the father is. It's up to you how you want to live, but it won't be with Ethan. We don't need poor relatives in our family. Now get out of here, and take your last paycheck with you." Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she grabbed the money and documents, running out of the office. The other workers watched silently, pitying her but saying nothing. Sarah couldn't believe that Ethan had betrayed her. She tried to tell herself that it wasn't his fault, that his parents had forced him into this decision. Desperate, she called Ethan, hoping to talk it through, but he didn't answer at first. When he finally did, his voice was cold. "It's over, Sarah. You should move on. I can't go against my father. We both made mistakes," he said before hanging up. Devastated, Sarah's world fell apart. She didn't tell her grandmother about the pregnancy, fearing it would worsen her already fragile health. That evening, Sarah packed her belongings, preparing to leave the town she once loved. "I'm sorry, Grandma, but I need to leave. I'm going to the city to find work, and I'll be fine. I'll write and call you often, I promise. Please don't come to see me off." Her grandmother, Mary, embraced her tightly, tears in her eyes. "What happened? Did you and Ethan have a fight? Why are you leaving so suddenly?" Sarah forced a smile, trying to stay strong. "Yes, Grandma. Ethan and I broke up. I just can't stay here anymore." Her grandmother sensed there was more to the story but decided not to press. Perhaps leaving would be for the best, she thought. Sarah needed a fresh start, away from the complications of her relationship with Ethan. With a heavy heart, Mary waved goodbye as Sarah boarded the train, unsure of what lay ahead. As the train pulled away, Sarah couldn't hold back her tears. She was terrified of what the future would bring, how she would manage alone in the city, pregnant and heartbroken. Sitting across from her on the train was a robust, talkative woman named Elena. Sensing Sarah's distress, she struck up a conversation, and soon, Sarah found herself sharing her story. After listening, Elena said, "I'm headed to the city to work for a businessman as a cook. They're good people and pay well. They're actually looking for a housekeeper. Why don't you come with me? It's worth a shot." Feeling desperate but also hopeful, Sarah agreed. When they arrived, Elena led her to a large, elegant home with beautifully landscaped gardens and a welcoming fountain. Elena introduced Sarah to Harold, the businessman. "Harold, this is Sarah. She's a hard-working young woman from a small town, looking for a fresh start." Harold examined Sarah closely and invited her into his office for an interview. "I don't usually hire young women," he said. "They tend to be irresponsible, and I need someone dedicated." Sarah, feeling nervous, decided to be honest. "I can handle all household chores, and I'll work hard. But I need to be upfront. I'm pregnant. I'm in the early stages, and I understand that makes it difficult to find work. I came here because my fiancé rejected me and our child. I couldn't abandon my baby." She braced herself, expecting Harold to dismiss her on the spot. Instead, he surprised her with his response. "Sarah, you're in a tough spot, but I admire your honesty and your decision to keep the baby. Not every woman has the strength to do that. I'll give you a 1-month trial. You can stay in the guest house. But be warned, if you steal or neglect your duties, you'll be let go immediately." Tears of relief welled up in Sarah's eyes. "Thank you. I won't disappoint you," she promised. That evening, as Sarah and Elena sat in the guest house having tea, Elena confided, "The boss hired you because your pregnancy resonated with him. He and his wife have been trying to have children for years but haven't been able to. They've tried everything, and recently, they've even been thinking about surrogacy. The surrogate mother would be living in the house soon, but to me, it felt like a strange arrangement. Just try not to get involved in their affairs," Elena advised Sarah. "And above all, don't say anything unnecessary to the boss's wife. She's a difficult woman and criticizes us frequently. Just agree with her, don't argue, or she'll fire you quickly. She has a terrible temper." Sarah received her uniform and began working for the businessman's family. She worked diligently, keeping the house spotless and maintaining the beautiful garden. Harold, the boss, was kind and well-mannered, but his wife, Mara, was the complete opposite. At first, Mara constantly criticized Sarah, inspecting every corner for dust and looking for any mistake. Sarah accepted the criticism silently, fearing for her job. Soon, the surrogate mother, Carla, moved into the house. Carla, a pretty young woman, felt uncomfortable initially, as everyone treated her like an incubator. She was forced to follow a strict balanced diet, take vitamins, be weighed daily, and exercise, regardless of the weather. Even a doctor visited the house regularly to check on her. Sarah pitied Carla, knowing how hard it was to follow such a strict routine, especially when feeling unwell during pregnancy. One day, Sarah overheard Carla asking for pickles, and Mara sternly responded, "Cravings are just excuses. The nutritionist has forbidden salty foods, and pickles are bad for the baby." Sarah, sympathetic, remembered she had a jar of homemade pickles from her grandmother. When no one was around, she discreetly handed them to Carla. "Here, take these. Just don't tell anyone I gave them to you, or Mara will scold me too. I understand, I'm pregnant as well." Carla smiled in gratitude. "Thank you so much. I've been craving something salty, but they keep serving me salads and fish, and I just can't stand it anymore." At first, Carla tried to get what she wanted through direct requests, but when no one listened, she changed her tactics. She began dressing provocatively, wearing short robes and giving Harold seductive glances, hoping to attract his attention. It seemed she was intentionally provoking Mara. Things came to a head one day when Harold, gently caressing Carla's pregnant belly, smiled as he felt the baby move. Mara erupted in a fit of rage. "What are you doing, Harold? Have you lost your mind? Are you going to start sleeping with her too? Why did we even bring this girl into our home?" she screamed. Harold, trying to remain calm, sharply retorted, "Stop shouting, Mara. It's bad for the babies. They can hear everything. I'm just feeling the baby move. It's a beautiful sensation. You should try it. Soon our children will be here, and it will be wonderful." Carla acted innocent, pretending not to understand the source of Mara's anger, though it was clear she was provoking the situation. Sarah observed everything, her heart sinking with envy. Harold and Mara's babies would be born into love and wealth, while Sarah's child would have nothing but her. Carla and Sarah, being at similar stages of pregnancy, occasionally spoke about their shared fears, but only when no one else was around. About a month before their due dates, a tragedy struck the household. Harold had been away on business and returned late one night. Sarah could hear Mara arguing with Carla. Following Elena's advice, Sarah decided to spend the night in the guest house to avoid hearing more of the family's personal dramas. The next morning, when Elena prepared a special breakfast for Carla, Sarah went to wake her, but found her room empty. Carla had disappeared overnight, taking only a few personal belongings and her documents. No one knew where she had gone. Harold was devastated. How could this happen? Where did Carla go? She only received half of the payment, we still owed her the rest. She's broken the contract and will face consequences in court. What if something happens to our babies? The due date is so close, he said, his voice trembling with frustration. Mara, despite her feigned concern, was secretly pleased with the news. The atmosphere in the house became even more tense. For Sarah, it was becoming harder to manage her duties as her pregnancy progressed. She could no longer carry heavy objects or work as efficiently, so she decided it was time to leave. Harold, though still reeling from Carla's disappearance, compensated Sarah generously, allowing her to rent a small room for herself. Alone in her cramped, suffocating new place, Sarah couldn't help but think of Ethan and his betrayal. She longed to return to her small town and her grandmother, but that seemed impossible now. She felt utterly lost. A week later, in the middle of the night, Sarah was struck by severe abdominal pain, followed by heavy bleeding. She managed to call an ambulance before collapsing. When she woke up in the hospital, the doctors told her she had undergone a difficult, premature labor, and tragically, her baby had not survived. The doctors had fought to save Sarah's life, but the emotional toll was immeasurable. Her body ached, especially her breasts, swollen with milk meant for a baby that was no longer there. The hospital stay was unbearable. She was surrounded by the cries of newborns and the joy of other mothers, all while she lay in silence, tears streaming down her face. One day, an elderly nurse approached her gently and said, "Sarah, at the same time you gave birth, another young woman delivered triplets. They're all healthy, but underweight and need extra care. The mother, Carla, has abandoned them. She didn't even want to see them. She said they weren't hers and fled the hospital. Those babies need to be fed, and you have milk. Would you consider feeding them? They need you." Sarah, her face swollen from crying, responded, "How is it that some of us lose our babies while others abandon theirs? It's so unfair. What's Carla's full name? I'll feed those babies. I don't mind. At least I can offer them some comfort." The nurse, seeing Sarah's pain, whispered, "Her name is Carla. You might know her. Maybe you could find their father. These babies need a home, not an orphanage." Sarah's eyes widened. "Of course I know her. Their father has been desperately searching for his children. I'll call Harold immediately, but first let me feed them." Mara had started taking the babies for short walks, but whenever they needed to be fed, she always returned them to Sarah. During the day, Mara often made phone calls to someone named Greg, and just before Harold came home from work, she would go out for a while and return in a noticeably good mood. Sarah began to notice something unusual about the babies. When they were with her, they were lively, playful, and loved interacting with toys, always smiling and full of energy. However, whenever Mara brought them back, they seemed unusually lethargic, sleeping much longer than usual. This change deeply worried Sarah because she had grown to love the babies as if they were her own. Though she recalled Elena's advice about not meddling in the family's affairs, her concern for the babies outweighed her hesitation. One day, Sarah decided to confide in Harold. Surprisingly, he remained calm. "Thank you, Sarah, for telling me. I've noticed some strange things about Mara's behavior recently, too. I'll take a closer look at everything myself. For now, please focus on caring for the children," he said, grateful for her honesty. Although Harold's response reassured Sarah, she became more cautious around Mara. A few days later, while Mara was out with the babies, Harold discreetly installed small cameras in the nursery and the kitchen to monitor what was happening while he was at work. After reviewing the footage a few days later, Harold was shocked by what he discovered. He overheard Mara talking on the phone to a man. "Please don't be upset," she said. "I'll come over after I put these kids to sleep. You have no idea how tired I am of all this. They aren't my children, and I just can't connect with them. Thankfully, my husband suspects nothing. And honestly, I don't even love him anymore." Mara's laughter echoed in Harold's ears. Anger surged through Harold. Not only had Mara been unfaithful, but the footage also revealed something even more alarming. In the kitchen, Mara had opened a jar of baby food, glanced around nervously, and then added a powdered substance from another container before mixing it into the puree and feeding it to the babies. Harold immediately had the contents of the powder jar tested, and the results left him outraged. It was a sedative in dangerously high doses. Enraged, he confronted Mara. "How could you?" he yelled. "You've been lying to me, and now I know about your affair. You said you wanted these children, but then you went behind my back and drugged them. Why? We're done. I want a divorce." Mara, unfazed by his outburst, stood up confidently. "I'm glad you finally figured it out," she said coldly. "Yes, I love Greg. He makes me happy in a way you never could. These children? I never wanted them. They cry constantly, one after the other, and it drives me crazy. They aren't a blessing, they're a burden. And as for the sedatives, it wasn't poison, I just needed peace and quiet for a few hours. I'm not going to spend my life chained to these kids or you. I'm young, beautiful, and I refuse to waste my youth here." With that, Mara packed her things and left, and Harold was left devastated. He immediately filed for divorce. Though Harold felt heartbroken by the betrayal, the entire household, including Sarah, felt a sense of relief now that Mara was gone. Over the next few months, Sarah and Harold grew closer. The babies adored her, often reaching for her and babbling words that sounded like, "Mama." Harold started to see Sarah differently, realizing how much she genuinely cared for the children, and what a loving and capable person she was. It dawned on him that Sarah, not Mara, was the true mother figure in the children's lives. One evening, Harold approached Sarah with a small box in hand. "Open it," he said softly. Inside was a sparkling engagement ring. "Sarah, will you marry me? After everything with Mara, I've realized how wrong I was in choosing her. I thought I needed someone who would impress at business dinners, but what I really needed was someone kind, nurturing, and devoted, a true mother to my children. I never expected to fall in love with you, but I did. I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Harold," she said, trembling, "is this real? I never thought someone like you could love someone like me. I love Berta, Adam, and Oliver so much, I can't imagine my life without them. Yes, I'll marry you. And there's something I'd like to ask, can we visit my grandmother? She's the only family I have left, and I want her to be part of our lives." Harold smiled and embraced her for the first time. "Of course, we can go tomorrow. I'd love to meet your grandmother, and if you'd like, she can come live with us. We have plenty of room in the house, and it must be hard for her to manage everything on her own." Sarah hugged him tightly. "You're the most wonderful man. I've been so worried about her. She's been struggling with her health, and I'd love for her to be close." The next day, the entire family set off to visit Sarah's grandmother. As they arrived in the small town, Sarah was flooded with memories of her childhood. She realized that her past with Ethan no longer mattered. Her heart belonged to Harold now. As they approached the gate, Sarah opened it nervously. Her grandmother's dog recognized her immediately, and began jumping up in excitement. Soon, her grandmother appeared on the porch, wrapped in a warm, worn coat. When she saw Sarah, she rushed over, tears of joy in her eyes. "Sarah! You've finally come home!" she exclaimed, hugging her granddaughter tightly. "And who are these beautiful children? Are they my great-grandchildren? And this handsome man, your husband? Why didn't you tell me sooner? Come inside, I've prepared lunch for us." The family sat together, enjoying the meal her grandmother had prepared. Sarah worried that Harold might not like the small, modest house, But to her surprise, he embraced the visit. He chatted with her grandmother, telling her all about his life and the family they were building together. Mara had begun taking the children for short walks but would always bring them back to Sarah to feed. Sarah noticed Mara frequently talking on the phone with someone named Greg, and just before her husband, Harold, returned from work, she'd leave the house and return in an oddly good mood. Sarah soon observed a concerning pattern in the baby's behavior. When they were with her, they were lively, giggling, playing, and engaging. However, after spending time with Mara, the babies appeared unusually tired, often sleeping for long stretches. This behavior was unlike anything she had seen before, and it worried her deeply. Although Sarah remembered Elena's words to stay out of family matters, her love and concern for the children outweighed her hesitation. She decided to talk to Harold. To Sarah's surprise, Harold responded calmly when she explained her concerns. "Thank you for telling me, Sarah," he said. "I've noticed some unusual things myself. I'll handle it from here. You just take care of the children." Sarah felt reassured but became more watchful of Mara's actions. On a day when Mara was out with the children, Harold decided to take matters into his own hands. He discreetly installed small cameras in the children's room and the kitchen, determined to discover what was going on when he wasn't home. A few days later, when Harold reviewed the footage, he was stunned. He overheard Mara speaking on the phone with someone. "Don't be upset, I'll come over as soon as I put these kids to sleep," she said. "You have no idea how exhausting this is. I don't care about them. They're not mine, and I just can't connect with them. Thankfully, my husband has no clue." Harold's heart sank, and anger welled up inside him. Not only had Mara betrayed him, but as he continued to watch the footage, he saw her in the kitchen. She opened a jar of baby food, looked around as if checking for onlookers, and then added something from a small container into the food. After mixing it carefully, she fed the children. Harold immediately sent the contents of the jar for testing. The results came back quickly. It contained a potent sedative. Furious, Harold confronted Mara. "How could you do this? I know everything. You've been lying to me and seeing someone behind my back. And now I find out you've been drugging the children? Why, Mara? Why would you do this? We're through." Mara, rather than being shaken, met his anger with indifference. "I'm glad you figured it out on your own," she said coolly. "Yes, I'm with Greg, and I'm much happier with him than I ever was here. I never wanted these children, they're exhausting. You think I'm a monster? All I did was give them something to help them sleep longer so I could get some peace and quiet. I'm young, and I'm not going to waste my life stuck here. I'm leaving." Mara packed her things and left the house that same day, leaving Harold heartbroken. Though devastated, he quickly filed for divorce, and a sense of relief swept through the household after she was gone. Over the following months, Sarah became an even more integral part of the children's lives. The babies adored her, often reaching for her and calling out what sounded like "Mama." Harold, too, began to view Sarah differently. He saw the care and affection she gave the children and the warmth she brought into their home. Slowly, he realized that Sarah, with her kindness and dedication, was exactly the kind of person he needed in his life. One day, Harold approached Sarah with a small box in hand. "I want you to open this," he said. Inside was a beautiful engagement ring. "Will you marry me, Sarah? After divorcing Mara, I've had a lot of time to think about what really matters. I made the wrong choice before, but now I know. You've shown me what it means to be a loving, kind person. I've fallen in love with you, and I want us to be a family." Sarah was overwhelmed with emotion. "Harold, are you serious?" she asked, tears in her eyes. "I never thought someone like you would want to marry someone like me. I love these children so much, I can't imagine my life without them. Yes, of course, I'll marry you." She paused and added, "I'd also love for you to meet my grandmother. She's the only family I have, and I'd like to invite her to the wedding." Harold smiled. "Of course, we can go visit her tomorrow. And if you want, she can even come live with us. We have plenty of space, and it must be hard for her to live alone now." Sarah hugged him tightly, feeling overwhelmed with happiness. You're wonderful. My grandmother's health hasn't been the best lately, and I know she'll be thrilled to meet you and the children. The next day, Harold, Sarah, and the children took a trip to Sarah's hometown. As they drove through the familiar streets, Sarah reflected on her past and realized she had moved on from her old life, including any lingering feelings she had for Ethan. Now, her heart belonged entirely to Harold. When they arrived at her grandmother's house, the dog in the yard recognized Sarah immediately, leaping in excitement. Her grandmother appeared on the porch, joyfully calling out, "Sarah! You've come home!" She hurried over to embrace her granddaughter, eyes sparkling with delight. "And who are these lovely children? Are they my great-grandchildren? And this fine man, is he your husband?" Sarah laughed, tears of joy in her eyes. "Yes, Grandma, these are your great-grandchildren, and this is Harold." Her grandmother welcomed them inside, where they enjoyed a hearty meal together, sharing stories and laughter. Harold, far from being uncomfortable in the small house, embraced the warmth of the visit. He spent the afternoon talking with Sarah's grandmother, learning about her life and their shared future. "Your story reminds me of my favorite soap opera," Mary said, her eyes glistening with emotion. "My poor granddaughter, she faced so many hardships in this town. And those children are so sweet. I'm glad you're well, Harold, but I worry about Sarah. She lost her child when she moved to the city and never told me about her pregnancy. If I had known, I wouldn't have let her go." "Mary, we didn't come just to visit," Harold interjected. "I want to ask for your blessing. Sarah and I have fallen in love and want to get married. She cares for my children as if they were her own." Mary hesitated. "What if the biological mother suddenly wants to see them? I don't want Sarah to suffer again." "Don't worry," Harold reassured her. "Mara, my ex-wife, didn't want them at all. She's made it clear she was happy to leave." Mary's expression changed. "Did you say the Sigget's name was Carla? That can't be." She suddenly fainted, clutching her chest. "Grandma, please!" Sarah cried, splashing water on her face. After a moment, Mary regained consciousness and spoke softly. "It's not your fault. I must tell you the truth. Carla is your half-sister. Your mother, a troubled woman, left you with me when you were just 3 months old and never returned. She later had another daughter, Carla, and abandoned her in an orphanage. I was too old to raise both of you and felt ashamed of my daughter's actions. I lied about your mother's love to protect you from hatred." Sarah was taken aback. "I want to find Carla. I even spoke with her when she lived at Harold's house. But where is she now?" Harold considered this. "I'm angry with the surrogate for running away, but I want to find her. I'll hire detectives." "Thank you, Harold." Sarah beamed, then turned to her grandmother. "We'd love for you to live with us. You won't be alone anymore, and I can't imagine you doing all the chores by yourself." "Thank you," Mary said, tears in her eyes. "I don't want to be alone anymore." A week later, Mary moved in with Sarah and Harold. She quickly grew fond of her new home and the children, sharing stories and songs with them. As Sarah and Harold planned their wedding, the detectives called with news that they had found Carla. Excited, Sarah said, "I'll go convince her to come home with us. Grandma is here, too. But please don't be too hard on her. I believe she had her reasons for running away." Harold nodded reluctantly. When Sarah met Carla at the detective agency, they embraced, both crying. "Sister, I'm so glad they found you. I've missed you. I want to know everything," Sarah said. "Did you grow up in the orphanage? It must have been so hard." "Do you remember our mother?" Sarah asked Carla, her heart aching with curiosity. "What was she like?" "I don't remember much," Carla replied with a sigh. "Grandma raised me. She wanted to take you in but was afraid she couldn't support both of us. Please don't blame her." "I understand," Sarah said softly. "I'm just happy to finally have you in my life, sister." "I'm glad too. I don't remember our mother either," Carla continued. "I only know that she brought me to the orphanage when I was little. They told me she was drunk and cried for a long time. I was lucky to be adopted by a loving family, but I can't call the woman who abandoned me Mom. I get that. Sarah nodded. I lost my child at birth, but now I care for Harold's kids. I've become their mother, and soon Harold will be my husband. Carla's eyes softened. You've built a beautiful life, Sarah. But I need to tell you something. A year ago, my father was diagnosed with cancer. My parents were ordinary people. My mom was an accountant, and my dad was an electrician. When the treatments became too expensive, I decided to become a surrogate mother. I thought I could earn enough money to help him. What happened? Sarah prompted, her heart aching for her sister. I passed the exams and got on a list, Carla recounted. Then I was contacted by a family of businessmen, Harold's family. I thought it would be simple, just carrying a baby for someone else. But I was unprepared for the reality of being pregnant with triplets. It was overwhelming, and I felt like I was just an incubator. I can't imagine how hard that must have been, Sarah said, sympathy flooding her. It got worse. Harold's wife, Mara, treated me like a rival. She didn't want me near her husband and accused me of trying to take him away. The night I fled, she threatened me, saying she'd pay me to disappear or harm me and the children if I didn't leave. So I ran. I'm so sorry you went through that, Sarah said softly. What happened next? I stayed with a friend for a while, and I managed to send money for my father's surgery. He's in remission now. But when it came time to give birth, I couldn't face my parents with 3 babies. I left them at the hospital and felt like a terrible person. I broke the contract and deceived Harold. Do you regret giving them up? Sarah asked gently. No, Carla replied, shaking her head. They're not mine biologically, and I didn't feel that maternal instinct. I'm glad they have you. You're caring and kind, and I know they'll be happy with you. I need to focus on my education and find a good job. Right now, I don't want children, mine or anyone else's. 2 weeks passed, and both Sarah and Grandma grew worried when Carla didn't return. One day, the doorbell rang. Sarah opened the door, surprised to find Carla standing there. Carla! She exclaimed, hugging her tightly. I'm so glad you came. Let me introduce you to Grandma. Carla stepped inside and noticed the triplets playing in a nearby playpen. They were laughing and giggling, but she felt detached. Wait, she said. I need to talk to Harold first. I'll understand if he doesn't want me here. Sarah led Carla to Harold's office. When he saw her, his expression changed. Carla, he said, removing his glasses. Why did you run away? I was scared, she admitted. Mara threatened me, and I didn't know what else to do. I know I was irresponsible, and I'm truly sorry. Harold took a deep breath. You scared me half to death. I worried about the kids constantly. If you had come to me, I would have helped you. I know, Carla said, looking down. I don't want any money. I just hope you can forgive me someday. I won't ever be a surrogate again. I forgive you, Harold replied, extending his hand. Now go see Grandma. She's been waiting for you. The reunion between Mary and Carla was heartwarming. They embraced, tears flowing freely. Mary finally felt relief, knowing her granddaughter was safe. Later, the family gathered for lunch, and Sarah felt a surge of happiness. She had finally formed a big, loving family. As the screen faded to black, a voiceover announced, "Thank you for watching! Don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell for more heartwarming stories."